We will begin this evening with comments from the public on agenda and non-agenda items. The Board of Education welcomes district residents, parents, students, and other people to our meeting. Community involvement at board meetings is encouraged so that we can better understand your views. Please be aware that individual student information or particular personnel issues will not be discussed by this board during public session. When recognized by the board president, please state your name and address. Statements are restricted to a maximum of 3 minutes, and speakers will be notified by the board president when their time has expired. When speaking, the public shall direct their comments to the board and not district staff or other audience members. Speakers shall not expect board members to answer questions during public comment. Questions shall be referred to the superintendent or his designate for review, study, and response. If appropriate, the board may request the issue be a discussion item at a future Board of Education meeting or Board of Education committee meeting. Anyone who would like to address the board, please come forward.
Marjorie Ellen Bosworth, 225 East Main Street. 2 days ago, I spoke to Mr. Van Oosteren, and I had a meeting with Dr. Crankshaw, and I understand in May 2021, the taxpayers approved the repair, replacement of the Knox track. And what happened to the steeplechase? Or lack of. It just kind of disappeared. And I understand in my discussion with Dr. Crankshaw, I kind of understand what happened, but I'm concerned that it happened and it kind of, people weren't made aware of it, and all of a sudden now it's gone. And hopefully it can be put back. Any information?
Do you have a statement prepared for?
Yeah, I'm gonna, if you stick around, and it's part of my report.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If that helps.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to address?
Oh dear.
I didn't when I came, but I saw something in here, and I got thinking about something. I read an article in yesterday's Gazette. Unfortunately, I didn't cut it out. It's out recycling now. But the city of Saratoga is having a kerfuffle with their city meetings. People coming in and giving their name and address. And somebody wrote that the open meetings law, or whatever law it is, you don't have to give your name and address. I see you people say you do. Something came up in the Gazette a while ago about it. In Schenectady, they stopped doing addresses because suppose somebody says something that somebody else doesn't like, they know where I live. We don't know where you live. Why should anybody know where I live? And I'm wondering, maybe a name. I can see maybe a name, if you don't know. But I don't think you should have to know where people are from.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else wish to address the board at this time? Okay, we'll move on to reports. We'll begin with the superintendent's report.
Let's see. I as usual, I just kind of group these comments in an update. I'm going to start with communication and safety. And the latest communication that I made was one regarding the track itself, and just the completion of the lining of the track. So originally I was going to make a video, thought that would kind of reach people a little bit better, but instead I wrote a letter. I think I forwarded it to folks, or at least let you know that I wrote this. And so it's out there. They did a good job today getting the lines marked, and I think there's more to do in some of the events, but it's underway. I kind of looked at it today, and I'm sure Dave did too. But that's on track, and I don't know if there's any information you'd like to have about the lining of the track, because it was a lot in the minds of people in the community, especially those with children in football and field hockey, even soccer. We're holding up our ability to get on the field. Well, it is a bit of a delay, but I'm happy to say that we'll resume play on the turf field next week. And so that's a good thing. Better than anticipated, as actually. So I don't know if you have any questions on that particular item.
I was over here the other day. Is there going to be any coverings for the long jump pits?
Yes.
There is. There will be. Okay. I noticed some other schools that I visited coverings.
Yeah, we have those covers manufactured specifically for those. I think that's for all, do you recall, I think it's for all those
For the long jump and triple jump.
long jump triple jump.
Okay, they're not on there now, though.
They're not, they haven't come in yet.
Yeah, I know there's a covering on there, but I didn't think that was, okay, good.
And I'll cover the steeplechase in a second. I wanted to go on to some programs and initiatives. As you know, we were accepted into the WAC. It was in the newspaper, and I expect more will kind of be out there. But we were accepted. I did send a letter to the Foothills Council, letting them know that we would be accepting the WAC's invitation. The board really needs to approve entrance into the WAC, so I think the October meeting will be the time to do that. As far as I know. So we did have a coaches meeting as promised in the plan in the white paper. So the idea was, let's see if we get accepted, then we will meet with the field hockey and lacrosse coaches specifically, because their teams are not represented in that, as you know. So field hockey to date requests this. They request that we apply for association in Foothills Council first, then to the Suburban Council, and then we would go to independent schedule. And that's their feedback. That is then summarized in writing, and we have that in writing from the coaches as well. Lacrosse, much the same. So let's start with Foothills Association, then move to the Colonial Wassering Association, and then an independent schedule by default. Do you have any questions about that? Because that's still in play.
It sounds like it's a little different than what was originally spelled out. I have no objection to it, and so long as that's following their feedback.
That's the section. That's the part where the feedback is consulted once we get accepted.
Gotcha.
So, and they were going to be given that preference.
Okay.
So that's where we are.
Okay.
And I think at least the field hockey has consulted with all the coaches.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good thing.
I am curious, will the teams, coaches have a role to play in any of the application process for associate membership with any of these leagues?
Just to represent our school well. And, it's going to be up to sometimes, I think our reputation as a school, and I can't think of any other reason we wouldn't be accepted, honestly. Because it's not like field hockey and lacrosse have tons of schools playing. The choice is not great. So I don't think they need to play a part in that. I think it's literally just a letter and a vote. Unless Brian, you want to contribute anything else?
Yeah, as far as I know, they don't need to really play a part in that at all, just.
And they all run a little differently too. So Foothills, the athletic directors vote. In the WAC, the superintendents vote. And then in the Wassering Colonial Council, I don't know what they do, but it seems like a good fit, at least for lacrosse in the Wassering Colonial. Just moving on to budget and personnel, it is audit season, so we have had an educational stabilization funds audit. That is for the first leg of the federal grants that we got, I think $419,000 or so. And we covered this last night in Audit, Budget, and Finance Committee, but that audit has been completed. We're just in the preliminary findings stage, so I'm sure you'll hear more about that in the report tonight. But it's a busy time. It starts in August, kind of continues into September. We're the second school in the state of New York to have that audit. So it was rough. It was a rough process, as audits can be. We also are going through our external audit, which is required by law by Weston Company. So that's in process. Audit, Budget, and Finance Committee got a little taste of what the results may be, but we still haven't had our preliminary findings yet. So that'll come, and the board will have to review that and accept it on the 12th of October. So that's coming up. And as far as budget planning for 24-25, we're already thinking about how we're going to build the budget for next year. Some things to consider, of course, long-range planning, how our budget next year fits in with the long-range plan, facilities planning, what our reserve plan needs to look like, and this planning is all in conjunction too for the budget for 24-25, and we need to support the data, our defense, I guess, of certain staff that we've been paying for by federal funds, which we need to continue through the general budget. Those are some of our social emotional learning team folks. E&L has been a big increase lately. The maintenance of our facilities, opportunities for students, extracurricular activities, clubs, activities, those things. Continuing the academic process and progress that we've had. And then, we gotta remember our demographics are changing, and they change rapidly. I think it was just the beginning of this week, we decided we need another special ed teacher and another E&L, which is English as a new language teacher. The one is impossible to find, the other one we have handled. But that's gonna continue because we continue to have an influx of migrant workers, and they're not going away. I think, what we get, 5 or 7 in 1 week's time? And maybe more since we talked. And those students constitute 1 full-time staff member. So special education is another thing to keep our eye on. I have a bit of a transportation report. I would say in our second week of August, we adopted a new platform for routing because we took that over this year. It's called Bus Rate. And we started with 237 students, now we're transporting 425. So that's increased, we're handling. Okay.
Why the huge shift?
Because we wait for parent requests. So there are a bunch of our students who are eligible. I would say we're near eligibility. I could be wrong about that. But, more of the eligible students' parents are requesting education. At first, some people don't observe the deadline. It's kind of the way it goes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of what it is.
Going on, are these new students, are they migrants or are they permanently here? Because a migrant.
I don't know yet because I have a call out to Pioneer Window, which is where they're all working. The parents are all working. And they're living in the FMCC dormitories. So, I don't know how temporary that is, but they're certainly here to work. And I just don't know enough about it, but I know that we've got to serve the students. So that's where we are. I'm just going to try to get a handle on it from the manufacturer. The HR people will be back next week. So I'll kind of follow up with them. Calls are starting to decrease. We haven't had a lot of calls. We've had some specific questions in transportation about, children being so small and the parents feeling it's not safe for them to walk to school a certain amount. But following board policy, we're doing that. And the calls are decreasing for sure. Those corner stops that we planned, we call them centralized bus stops. Most of them are taking advantage of it, I would say. We have some special education door-to-door pickups and drop-offs still. If you hear this in the community, sometimes it looks like, gosh, there's a bus right here and they're picking up a special education student. It seems like they could just pick up a first-grade student who's across. Well, it's not board policy to do that. So we have to somehow maintain board policy. Lori knows a thing or two about how policy runs transportation. Late bus has been implemented this week for students who are eligible, and extracurricular busing seems to be going very well, unless anybody's hearing something I'm not hearing, but we seem to be on time. Any comments on that? Athletic busing?
Everything's going pretty well, a lot better than last year, so.
We are a little concerned because we have about 6 out of the 10 aids that were promised, so each bus should have an aid, but I guess they're having a hard time with that. But we're going to keep on top of that too. And then I'd like to move to the steeplechase now. So the steeplechase was removed from the track. It was not the fault of the contractor, and I wouldn't say it's anyone's fault in particular. I would just say the blame, if anyone wants to blame it, lays with me. But there are reasons. So when the budget goes, when that proposition goes out there to the public, we present a picture of what the capital project will be. And as that capital project kind of is developed and morphed, we take things out sometimes when we see the costs come in. And that's one important fact to remember. The steeplechase, I think it was a little bit of cost, there was a little bit of, we talked about safety, we talked about liability, we talked about the maintenance of it because the drain had not been working. there was some caving in of the sides, it needed to be repaired, and it was originally part of the project. It was even part of the project when we went to state ed. It was still part of the project, as were other things in that. So like this wrought iron fencing, which is not in that project right now because it came at a huge cost. So once we put it out to bid though, we decided before that to remove the steeplechase. And looking back now, I wish I could reverse that decision because I think it was short-sighted in some ways. I appreciate that it would have been an important cost difference. $60,000 was the quote we were given by our architect. Then the liability and the maintenance concerns for an event that isn't utilized very often. For example, in track meets, you don't have steeplechase events. For invitationals, you do, but you're also allowed to have a dry steeplechase, which we are certainly capable of doing still. We have not been able to host, correct me if I'm wrong, not invitations, but sectionals and state qualifier meets since they changed the rules.
They're actually, in terms of like 8 and 6 lane tracks,
Yeah.
there's not a rule on that. I did talk to them.
Oh, good. So there's no rule on that. So chances are we might have been able to do it. We haven't been hosting those events anyway. And so in light of all those things, I think the steeplechase was removed. We kind of decided as a construction team. The board was not necessarily involved in that conversation, and I wish that I had involved them. I think it was important to give them an opportunity in retrospect to weigh in on something like that. But you know, I'm a superintendent. I'm one person who has certain specialties and certain knowledge. I can't say that I thought the steeplechase was one of those important events that we needed to pay attention to, and that's my own ignorance. And we had a changeover in athletic directors. There has been a lot of change. So in retrospect, it was not a mistake. I would say it's a regrettable decision, and one that I would like to have brought up today in our owners meeting that we would like to revisit in the future to see if we can put that back in, either a small capital project or part of another capital project. And it can be done. We established that with our team today. So I just want to remind everyone that capital projects, we first go to, we develop a scope with the facilities committee and all the folks that we need to talk to. And by the way, the coaches were consulted on keeping the steeplechase. They did want to keep the steeplechase. And so I think the decision came among the construction team, which the coaches were not part of it. But once we reach that critical scope of the project, we submit it to state ed for their approval. We then get bids based on that scope, and then we have to make decisions all along the way from there. You know, what do we need to take out? What things do we need to modify based on how costs are coming in? That's primarily a big decision. And these capital projects in development will change over time. But I think that's important to say, but I also think I'm a little sick in my stomach about having taken the steeplechase out, if I'm being honest. But that's just because I can't go back and fix it, except we can move forward and we can really celebrate the beauty of that field right now. We can celebrate the turf. We are in wonderful shape, and the steeplechase can run in invitational if we really must have it as a dry steeplechase, but I think we need to think forward about putting that back in the field. So that's the update on the steeplechase, and I'm just being brutally honest with you. And I can't lay blame on anyone, and I wish we had included the board in it. So I don't know if you have any questions on that. I don't think I can be more honest with you. Doesn't make it okay. I just think we need to think about fixing it.
Understood. We can have a conversation. That's something we can bring up maybe at the next facilities committee meeting.
Yeah.
Figure out what your initial thoughts are on that.
And I think unless the board has any questions, that was my report.
Does Fondant have a steeplechase?
Yes.
Lovers of it?
Don't know. I would guess they do, but I don't know. Do they do? I was told by our architects that regionally, and our project manager is working on Gloversville right now. He knows the area pretty well for the medium capital project, and he did say that roughly 50% of the schools in our area have steeplechase, and 50% don't.
It seems like a dry steeplechase would be a lot safer. 'Cause
Well,
I've seen kids slip on those things.
One would think.
As a
I don't know.
As a parent of a former steeplechase runner, I can tell you that probably 90% of the enjoyment of the race is the water. Anybody who's watched somebody flop in, that is the cause of the excitement. So, and it has been a point of, I think, a lot of interest on the part of spectators. Not only parents who have kids who run the event, but just in general, when they have the event, it usually attracts a pretty big crowd and builds a lot of excitement. So, in as much as Dr. Crankshaw has expressed regret in how the decision came to be, and as disappointed as I may be about it, it was still within their purview to make that decision. And we'll explore what can be done to rectify the situation. But I don't think necessarily in support of spending 3 times the amount just to put it back. So, we need to be cautious of what we're committing to do there. Okay, so we'll move on. Next up, we have the employee leadership reports, and we'll start with Nancy Lisicki for the JTA.
Stand over here, I don't know where else to go. So I'm not back to anybody in this very cozy environment.
Well lit, too.
Welcome back to another school year. Over 20 years ago, when I was a newly hired teacher, I attended the new teacher orientation that was hosted by the Johnstown Teachers Association. I was welcomed by teachers, by the likes of Nolan Marcinek, Jane Sitterly, Diane Eddy, Irene Hauser, you know the names, they're legends here. Since then, JTA has continued to host a new member orientation each summer with the goals of introducing and acclimating new employees to this district. So under the tutelage of numerous JTA members who volunteer their time over the summer, like those who volunteered their time to welcome me over 20 years ago, we help new educators understand APPR. We teach them how to use the district supply technology. We review our collective bargaining agreement. We talk about professionalism, what that means. We've covered a variety of other educational related topics. But over the past several years, under our new administration, this orientation has blossomed. Through our collaborative efforts, new employees, not just JTA members, but members of all bargaining units, they have been participating in an orientation that includes a significant amount of face time with the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, all of the building principals, the director of curriculum instruction, the director of pupil services. And that doesn't happen everywhere. Johnstown is unique in that. It happens in some districts, but the face time that they're given, it's given in a very intimate setting, kind of goes like this. Where new employees, they share about themselves, they learn about each other, and they have access to administrators on a very personal level. We were fortunate to learn that pretty much every one of Mr. Hill's former students was hired back. And we heard how much they adored him. Mr. Kramer's nose was a little bit out of joint. This new school year, we welcome almost 30 JTA members and countless other employees. So we're really fortunate to have the collaboration of our administrative team as partners in integrating our new employees into Servill's Nation. I'm going to clone that one. The JTA does maintain its commitment to our members, who are your employees, building community, and supporting our district goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Lisicki. Next we have Deborah Jerry with the CSEA.
So I love it when I follow Nancy, because she just paves the way. She takes care of it all. I don't have to add a whole lot to that, so thank you, Nancy, you're the best. So I wanted to speak on new faces and old friends. I have to tell you that initially when I heard about the new breakup configuration, I had some personal feelings about that. And not all of them were enthusiastic, partly because I was mourning the fact I was going to lose fifth graders. That they were going to go to Knox and I wouldn't have them at Warren Street. But I have done a 360-degree turnaround on the whole idea, and partly because I walked into Warren Street, just because that's my building, and it feels right now that it's a 2-3-4. It feels like an elementary building again. It feels enthusiastic, it feels happy and comfortable. And it's because there are some old faces. People have been there for a long time. I'm one of them, like Jerk. I've been there forever. But then there's so many new people who are bringing new life, new blood, new ideas, new characteristics to that building. And it's awesome. I walked into Knox today because I was covering that building as well as my own. That doesn't happen often, that we have two nurses out at the same time. And that felt right. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. And I saw staff that I've known for years. I saw kids that I had as wee little ones. And then I saw all these new people. And the place was just alive and buzz. So I think it's really incredible that we've changed everything up and it's come out so good. And that's a credit to Justin. My last little blurb is that CSEA has undergone a little bit of a shift too. We have some old faces and new faces in our organization. I'm happy to announce that we have a new president in CSEA. Bobby Josenzio is taking on that role. And our old face of Julie Laux, and God bless her, has stepped down to a vice president's position. So we're enthusiastic about that change too, and it carries over. Old friends and new faces. So thank you very much, and it's wonderful to address the board. Enjoy your evening.
Okay, I do not have a board report, so we'll move on to the committee reports. We had a facilities committee meeting last week. I'll give you a brief update on status with that. We discussed capital projects, starting with a small capital project. As has been mentioned already, the track surface is installed. There was a need for a few days of curing, targeting the lining for September 22nd, which is taking place already. The bridle path has been widened on the south end curve due to a slight widening of the track and fence line. The contractor will be doing some additional paving around the east side of the track near the visitors' bleachers to create a better, safer condition on the surface of the paving. And the substantial completion inspection is targeted for this Friday. And efforts will be made to test some scope choices for the ornamental fence. I don't think I wrote that right, but anyway. One section will be repaired, one section will be replaced, and, oh, that's what that meant. Yeah, so with the wrought iron fencing, the idea is they're going to test a few options. One, to test a whole new panel of wrought iron fence, and one, to do some repairs to see what seems to be the more efficacious way to make that whole system work again. So that will be something that's coming up, and there will be a review of the expenses and the level of quality with each methodology that's employed. Medium capital project planning is continuing, and at the last meeting, the last facilities meeting, we reported that we were facing some cost overruns on the planned budget. Recent work has narrowed that budget gap to a $500,000 overrun. So, I mean, we were over by, I think, it was like $5 million, and we brought that down to $500,000. Still some work to be done to close that additional gap. The cost estimate reductions are the result of a specific due diligence examination of the scope of work, With JHS, it was reduced by $120,000. Knox's scope was reduced by $1.2 million. Warren's scope was reduced by $189,000. Glebe was reduced by $260,000, and Pleasant was reduced by $164,000. So it was a lot of good effort on the part of the design and construction team to identify those savings. And then the timeline for the project is still intact, so we'll be submitting this fall, right? October. Submitting to SED for approval in October. Smart Bond, this is something that we've been talking about seemingly incessantly for the last 10 years. We have equipment, still waiting for installation of cameras and smart boards and such. The new server was required to handle the increase in the camera count. The new server has been received and is installed and is ready for commissioning. So project completion is targeted for January of 2024. School opening, some moving was still happening at the beginning of September. The lion's share of the relocation has been completed, and a lot of the old stuff has been purged from storage. So all in all, things seem to be in pretty good shape. Our next meeting is Wednesday, November 8th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. All right, and then we also had the Audit, Budget, and Finance Committee meeting last night. The information was provided on the preliminary 2022-23 financial performance. Our school lunch program ended the 22-23 school year with a net positive fund balance of $141,000. The shift of food service staff to BOCES should yield positive financial performance by the end of this year. The school lunch fund seems to finally be out of a historical structural deficit, something that we are glad to hear. Cost of food and supplies will continue to be a challenge, though, with recent inflationary pressures. The external audit has also been underway since August, and as Dr. Crankshaw mentioned earlier, we are currently working to reconciling some financial statements to confirm the net fund balance. A little bit of information was shared on the ESF preliminary audit findings. The ESF is the Educational Stabilization Fund audit, which was conducted by SED in August. We are the second school in the state to receive this audit, so we're a little bit on the cutting edge of this process. The ESF was the first round of federal COVID relief in the amount of $419,000. All of it was used in the first year to cover 5 salaries and associated benefits. The preliminary audit findings were critical in 5 specific areas which the district is addressing and are the result of record keeping of processes already in place but not necessarily noted. The auditor suggested we should have a standard operating procedure manual to back up the district policies for business and finance processes, but that is not a requirement, and it's merely a suggestion at this point. The administration will take suggestions to begin the process of formulating an SOP manual. It's important to note here that the discrepancy had to do with the perspective of the auditors. They did not seem to be overly familiar with school district accounting procedures and policies and methodologies, and we're taking a very critical view of that. I mean, mostly that's their job, but we were asked to make some changes. We're taking that under consideration, and Dr. Crankshaw and Alicia will be looking into that over the next, I think we had some in by December, right? So we got a couple months to try to pull this together. So there's a lot to go through, and we may consider having a retreat at some point before the end of December to discuss that process. Some additional staffing needs were also discussed on the special education side. There's been a sudden influx of enrollment that requires special education supports at one particular level, specifically Knox. There are 12 students with 1 teacher and 1 aide, so we need another special education teacher. And then English as new language is, as was mentioned, we've had an influx of students that require language supports per SED, and ENL certified teachers are difficult to find. On the capital project financial planning update, as was mentioned, we needed to review long-range financial planning for related to capital planning and impact. We need to review the scope items being squeezed by the budgetary constraints. We are looking to improve Pleasant Avenue parking capacity, something that has come into clearer focus now that school has started. We've reintroduced the idea of potential need for small capital projects apart from the small, medium, large projects already under consideration, and that's to maybe deal with some of these things that are getting squeezed a little bit. So that's what I have to offer. Any questions about that?
What are we doing for those students for English as a new language? Are we doing anything for them?
Yeah, well, not the new ones, I'm sure. You want to comment on that?
Sure.
It's been a chess game.
Yeah, so currently we're still working on getting paperwork for them. They're coming to us from a New York City school, but the families didn't know what school they were coming from, so it's been kind of a hard hunt for us to figure out which New York City school they came from. But we are already in the process of signage in all of the schools that they'll be attending, so main spaces, they'll be labeled with Spanish words so that they feel comfortable coming in. We also have our ENL provider, the day that they are coming in, she'll be working with them and spending more time. We've also worked with our high school students as well, so Spanish 5 students who have some type of Spanish, to spend maybe a day and buddy up with them to kind of help so that they can translate a little bit better than some of our staff. We also have programming that we're looking into with some of our current vendors that are specific to ENL to provide additional supports as well for them. But
So we already have one ENL teacher
Yep.
full-time.
and there are a couple of retired ENL providers that may be interested in part-time work to fill that full-time position. So we have our current ENL provider is doing a great job, and we have other teachers that are willing to step up and take a 6th period stipend if need be, or whatever it might be. So I think the Johnstown community is doing a nice job, and they're doing whatever they can to support those kids. So
And
absolutely.
I think you're creating that position for the ENL teacher tonight, just so we have it ready to fill.
Spanish is the only language that we.
No. We have all sorts. So we have NAM, which is a Guatemalan native language that is only a spoken language, not written. We have Spanish, Japanese, what am I forgetting? Japanese and Spanish, okay, and NAM are the big ones right now. And the big concern right now is that the children that are coming in are newcomers to the U.S., so they qualify for 360 minutes if they're a student in K through 8 of ENL service, and are anyone over, or K through 7 and 8 through 12 actually qualifies as 540 minutes. We did have one student come to us but was over the age to have to enter her into that situation. So, and so we hooked them up with the literacy zone and also the GED programming.
But, you mentioned qualifying, but it's actually required.
Yeah.
It's a law that was.
Yeah, they test into the program, so our ENL provider is qualified to provide a NICETEL test, which is basically trying to determine where they fall in the spectrum of ENL services, and then they qualify for a certain amount of minutes in person, pull out and push out, push in also requirements as well. So that's a pretty hefty mandate. And it comes at a high expense to the district as well.
Thank you. I don't believe we have any correspondence this evening, right? Okay. So moving on to the consent agenda, in an effort to expedite the business of the Board of Education, but in no way meant to diminish the importance of each item, consent agenda may be used for the items in this section. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any one board member. Items not removed will be adopted by general consent without debate. Any removed items may be taken up either immediately after the consent agenda or placed later on the agenda at the discretion of the board. So I'm looking for a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented, which would include the following agenda items: Section 4, letter A1, letter B, and letter C. That's business, personnel, and approval of the CSE, CPSE, and 504 committee minutes. Need a motion? Marge, second. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Moving on to action items business. I am curious. I think the first two I'm going to read through, and then anybody on the personnel team? No? Okay. So, all right, I'm going to go through the first two items. Extension of contract with Tetra Tech Engineers, Architects and Landscape Architects PC. Looking for a motion. Whereas by prior resolution, the Greater Johnstown School District approved an agreement with Tetra Tech Engineers, Architects and Landscape Architects PC to provide professional architectural engineering consulting services based upon task-specific requests authorized in writing by the Greater Johnstown School District, and whereas the Superintendent of Schools recommends extending the contract between the Greater Johnstown School District and Tetra Tech Engineers, Architects and Landscape Architects for the 2023-24 school year. Now therefore be it resolved that a letter of agreement between the Greater Johnstown School District and Tetra Tech Engineers, Architects and Landscape Architects dated August 30th, 2023 is hereby approved, and the Superintendent of Schools is authorized to execute the agreement on behalf of the school district. So I'm looking for a motion to accept that resolution. Okay, second, Marge? Any discussion, questions?
This is just to extend the general services contract we currently have. It's run out, and we're going to keep working on it, so we're going to, this is on their end.
All right, all those in favor? Aye? Okay. Item number 2 is a green sheet item. This is award of contract for provision of transportation services to a student with disabilities for an out-of-district run. Looking for a motion to accept the resolution as follows. Whereas the Greater Johnstown School District is faced with an unforeseen circumstance when it recently learned that HFM BOCES would not be able to provide transportation for an out-of-district run for a student with disabilities, and whereas the start of the school year requires transportation to commence on September 6, 2023, and the district did competitively bid this out of district run, but received no bids, and whereas Education Law 305-14B permits a Board of Education to award an emergency transportation contract without competitive bidding not to exceed 1 month, and be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby determines that an emergency exists as would satisfy Education Law 305-14B, and be it further resolved that the Board of Education hereby authorizes the superintendent and/or assistant superintendent to enter into the necessary emergency contract not to exceed 1 month with Amazing Grace at a cost, that's the busing company, at a cost of $7,370, that amounts to 22 days at $335 per day. Resolved that this resolution shall take effect immediately. Can I get a motion to accept that resolution? Okay, second. Marge? Any questions? Comments, concerns?
Where are we busing the student to?
Sure, so it's to Vanderheiden School
And where?
in Rensselaer, Vanderheiden.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll move to vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Say aye. Thank you very much. Action items, personnel. We have 15 items on this agenda. That includes a green sheet item, which is the leave of absence and probationary appointment of Delilah Purcell. I would like to suggest that we condense these into a consent agenda. Anybody object? All right, so we will move to collect Action items, personnel, items 1 through 15 as a consent agenda. Nothing being removed from that. So I'll ask for a motion to accept that consent agenda. Marge, second Ron. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Or raise your hand. Flip flopping back and forth. It's still intimate.
I'm trying to keep us on our toes.
Okay, so for board discussion, we have a number of policy revisions in front of us. We have a first reading of policy 3410, code of conduct. We have a first reading of revised policy 3420, non-discrimination and anti-harassment in the district. We have a first reading of revised policy 5140, administration of the budget. The first reading of revised policy 6121, sexual harassment in the workplace. A review of policy 3221, which is use of assistance animals, and administrative regulation 3221R, service animal use regulation, and a continuation of policy manual audit of section 7000. So does anybody have any questions about any of these policies? There's been a lot of revision to them as issued by our policy service that we subscribe to. Obviously this is an opportunity to ask questions.
I can speak to them, just to the changes if you
Sure.
want. So the code of conduct, as you know, we're going to get the shared decision-making team together. We're going to spend kind of a year-long process reviewing our code of conduct. But this policy is the basic policy for the board. Basically, we have updates of language. There's some needless language in here, which was removed, a lot of red. And the red was removed because it's already law, and it's not necessarily important to include in the policy. Shells were replaced with wills, and it's other than that, it's not much in the way of change. But we're going to see a lot of change in practices with the code of conduct by the end of the year. The non-discrimination and anti-harassment in the district policy, that's quite a bit of additional language, and that's really to update and clarify language that is appropriate to policy in this current time that we're living in. And I would say a lot of these changes come with some of the responsibilities that are imparted to the school district on behalf of this policy. Much of this language is literally just explanation of what you already know, but a lot of it's update to the Title IX officer, for example, in this policy is replaced with the civil rights compliance officer, and those, not a lot of change here, but just updating. Administration on the budget, we're retiring information in this policy that's no longer relevant. For example, the statement of total funding allocation is no longer required. It's in our policy, you'll see it crossed out in red, and that's the extent of that one. Sexual harassment in the workplace. There are a couple of bullets I wouldn't mind reading if you don't mind. So some of the change, this is practically rewritten, the sexual harassment. And there is an increased emphasis in gender identity in this particular policy, diversity, gender expression, the status of being transgender, gender identity, sexual orientation. There's an expanded definition of sexual harassment as it applies to legal. References to remote work, which we've never had in our policy before. Can you imagine enduring harassment while you're remote? I mean, this is all now represented in the policy. The addition of a section on bystander intervention and examples of retaliation, if we know that we're not allowed to retaliate when someone reports. So, if you get a chance, read this through, but I think it's the recommendation of the policy through their policy service, through their attorneys, that we adopt this policy as it is. I don't see any problem with it personally.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, we just have the service animals. I just wanted the board to know that when the service animal opportunity came to us recently, I think we got some questions, but we greeted it with open arms. And what we didn't have was procedures. And if you were at the Audit Budget Finance Committee meeting last night, we talked about the audit and some of the procedures or regulations we don't really have in place. What we do for this policy, we worked on those. We now have the forms. So when someone comes and requests a service animal, we have and access this. We have an application. This is what you need to make sure the dog is toileted. And make sure it's not a horse. It can be a pony or a horse. And just, we have training suggestions, and as we need to know, there is no New York State requirement for any training of any service animal or supporting or therapy animals. Yes, you can have an animal without training. So we now have regulations for that policy. You'll see a couple of pets walking around.
Okay. You're all good?
I think so.
Okay. Okay, so, any other questions by the board members on those policies? So a few informational items. On October 11th, we'll have our academic and extracurricular committee at 5:30 p.m. at the district office. Again, on October 11th, we'll also have the next audit, budget, and finance committee at 6:30. And October 12th will be the public hearing and business meeting at 6 p.m. at the JHS Media Center. And October 18th will be a personnel committee at 6:30 p.m. in the district office. Now there is a need to have an executive session. So this would be subject to board approval. So I'd be looking for a motion to enter into executive session for the following purpose, which would include discussing the employment history of a particular person and discussing collective negotiations pertaining to the CSEA union pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law. Motion, Mark, second. So Jim's first. So. Sure.
I'm so sorry. But the 12th, the meeting on the 12th,
yeah,
the public hearing business meeting,
Wednesday, yeah, it can't all be Wednesday.
it should be Thursday. Wednesday, but it should be Thursday. I would ask the board if they would consider coming at 6 o'clock just to get an update on capital project stuff, because I think some things are moving and shaking now.
It starts with
When is this?
It starts at 6 on the 12th, which is now Thursday.
12th of
October.
Rather than a public hearing, we really want that to be a kind of a facilities informational meeting for the entire board. So it's kind of a workshop, but it would be open to the public anyway. Because we kind of have to bring you up to speed on where we are with the scope of the meeting capital project, because SED submission is, yeah, so. Am I being unclear?
But it all begins at 6.
It could be, I'd love it to begin at 5:30, but I know how that is for some folks. It's hard to get you there. So we can do our best to encapsulate what we have by sending materials ahead of time, if that's what's necessary, I don't know. But we cannot move forward until I think the board understands the scope of the meeting.
I'd just like to see it one time. I mean, you got 6:30, 6:30, then you go to 6, and then our June meeting is back to 6:30.
Well, during the winter, when we start our budget discussions and planning, we always start at 6, so that we have a half hour to get the presentation from our administration on that.
So what's really happening, I think, is on the 11th, we got, on the 11th, we have 2 committee meetings. So one's at 5:30, one's at 6:30. And then the regular business meeting is just the board meeting. And I'm just asking if you'll come a half an hour early at 6 to get the skinny on the meeting.
On October 12th.
Yes.
October 12th.
Change it on there because it's
Which
different
is a
on there.
Thursday, not a Wednesday.
I got the changes in here.
And then once we hit November, then we're kind of in budget workshop mode. But we could put that off if the finance committee wants to. That doesn't really have to start till January.
No, we should start it. So 6 p.m.
6 p.m.
on the 12th.
It'll be kind of a public workshop.
Yep.
And just the capital.
Okay.
Sorry.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. So getting back to the motion. So we have a motion from Marge, a second from Jen. All those in favor going into executive? All right. All in favor? Maybe what I should I adjourn first? No? We have done that in the past, when we've adjourned. We adjourn after the, yeah, I see. Okay. I need to.